My husband told me, Phoebe is your stepsister. It's not cheating, it's expanding our family. You need to accept her living with us. The next day, I emptied our bank accounts, filed for divorce, and plotted a revenge he and my stepsister would never forget. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. My name is Beverly. Take a seat, get comfortable. I'm at an age now where life is supposed to be settled. You expect a certain predictability, a comfortable rhythm, like the reliable changing of the seasons. For the longest time, my life was exactly that, structured, solid, built on a foundation I thought was unshakable. I had built a home, a family, a future, piece by loving piece, never once doubting the solid ground beneath my feet. I was always the kind of woman who believed in a simple contract with life. If you worked hard, loved with your whole heart, and stayed loyal, life would, in turn, be good to you. But I was wrong. So deeply, devastatingly wrong. The early years of my marriage to Garrett, they were like something out of a storybook. We started with nothing but a shared dream and a tiny, drafty apartment filled with second-hand furniture. I remember laughing as we tried to fix a wobbly leg on a coffee table we'd found on the curb. We didn't have money, but we had each other. We scrimped, we saved, and inch by inch, we built a life from scratch. He was ambitious, climbing the corporate ladder, and I was the heart of the home. I found my joy in creating a sanctuary for our family. My garden, especially, was my canvas. I poured my soul into that patch of earth, coaxing life from the soil, watching it bloom year after year. It was my legacy. Our children, Audrey and Spencer, were the twin sons our world revolved around. Our living, breathing proof of a love I thought was eternal. And for 20 years, I truly believed we were solid. Unbreakable. Until the night the foundation turned to sand and everything I had ever built washed away. Looking back, the signs were there. They always are, aren't they? Little hairline fractures in the facade that you choose to ignore. Garrett became distant. Preoccupied. I'd be telling him about my day, about a new rosebush I'd planted, and I'd see his eyes were a million miles away. He'd come home late, smelling faintly of a world that didn't include me. I told myself it was stress. His promotion at the firm had come with more responsibility, a higher salary, but also longer hours. I made excuses for him, for us. I'd rub his shoulders, make his favorite dinner, and tell myself, this is just a phase. It will pass. But the truth was far simpler and far more cruel. He had already decided our marriage was a cage, and he was secretly forging a key. And then came the night that shattered everything. A Friday. I'll never forget it. I had spent the entire afternoon in my garden, my hands deep in the rich soil, carefully tending to the heirloom roses my grandmother had given me as cuttings when we first bought the house. They were a living link to her, to my past. I walked into the house around 6, tired but happy, smelling of sunshine and earth. The house was too quiet. A deep, unnerving silence that felt wrong. No TV, no music. I went upstairs to our bedroom. And there he was. Not in his work suit, but dressed to go out. A crisp, dark shirt I'd ironed for him, the expensive cologne I'd gifted him for his last birthday hanging in the air. He was standing before the full-length mirror, adjusting his collar with an unsettling focus. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual as I leaned against the doorframe. "Where are we going? Don't tell me I forgot a date night." He didn't turn, just met my eyes in the reflection. His face was a placid, calm mask. "We're not going anywhere, Beverly," he said, his voice devoid of any warmth. "I am." A cold, heavy dread began to pool in my stomach. It was a physical sensation, like I'd swallowed a stone. "What do you mean, you are?" "I have a date tonight," he stated, finally turning to face me. His expression was flat, clinical, as if he were discussing the weather. The kids are at their friends' houses for a sleepover. I won't be home until morning. I let out a laugh. It was a brittle, sharp sound that held no humor. A part of my brain was desperately scrambling, trying to find the joke. This had to be a joke. A date? That's not funny, Garrett. Not at all. I'm not joking, he said, and the finality in his tone made the floor drop out from under me. Beverly, we've been together for 20 years. I love you, but I just need one night. One night to feel something different. Something new. My blood ran cold. The scent of roses on my hands, which I usually loved, now seemed sickly sweet, like funeral flowers. What are you talking about? You need a night, with who? My voice was a choked whisper. He took a deliberate breath, the kind of breath you take before delivering a difficult presentation at work. It's Phoebe. The name struck me with the force of a physical blow. It knocked the air from my lungs. Phoebe. My stepsister. The daughter of the woman my father married a few years after my mother passed from a long, painful battle with cancer. We were never true sisters. There was always a chasm between us, of age, of personality. She was flighty, often irresponsible, and I'd spent years trying to be the steady, reliable older sister. I'd lent her money, invited her to every family holiday, offered her a shoulder to cry on more times than I could count. Phoebe? I repeated the name, tasting bile in my mouth. My stepsister, Phoebe? She understands me, Bev, he said, as if that was a reasonable explanation. As if that made any of this okay. Look, this isn't about destroying what we have. It's about expanding it. Evolving. Think of it as an open marriage. An open marriage? The words were so foreign, so grotesque, I could barely form them. You want to throw away 20 years of our life, our family, our home, for an open marriage, with my own stepsister? He actually had the audacity to look annoyed, as if I was the one being difficult. You're blowing this completely out of proportion. It's not cheating if I tell you beforehand. It's honesty. It's just one night. After tonight, everything will go back to normal. Normal? I finally found my voice, and it came out as a raw shriek. Nothing will ever be normal again. If you walk out that door tonight, Garrett, we are done. Do you understand me? It is over. He smirked then. A cold, condescending twist of his lips that was utterly alien to me. It was the smile of a stranger, a cruel one. You won't divorce me, Beverly. Think about it. And if you try, I'll make sure you regret it for the rest of your life. This house, he gestured around the room I had so lovingly decorated, the kids, the money from my salary. I'll take it all. I'll hire the best lawyer. I'll make sure Audrey and Spencer see you as the bitter, old-fashioned woman who destroyed their family because she couldn't be a little more flexible. I stared at him, my heart hammering against my ribs. The man I had shared my life with was threatening me, blackmailing me into accepting his infidelity. This is what love looks like to you? Threats? It's what reality looks like, he said, grabbing his keys and wallet from the dresser. It's just one night. It's no big deal. Who knows, he added with a wink that made my stomach churn, maybe she'll teach me a few new things that could even spice up our marriage. My fists clenched, my nails digging into my palms. Call it off, Garrett. Right now. And maybe, just maybe, we can find a way to fix this. Otherwise, I swear to you, there is nothing left to save. He just waved a dismissive hand, already halfway out the door. We can talk about counseling tomorrow. And just like that, he was gone. I heard his confident footsteps on the stairs. A car horn honked from the street, she was waiting for him. I stood there, frozen in the middle of our bedroom, listening to the sound of the front door opening and then closing with a soft, final click. And then, I broke. I didn't just cry, I collapsed. I sank to the floor, the plush carpet doing nothing to soften the blow, and I sobbed. A deep, guttural sound of a soul being torn in two. I cried for my marriage, for the trusting woman I used to be, for the beautiful, safe family I thought I had. 20 years of shared memories, inside jokes, and quiet moments, all of it felt like a lie. He had never once voiced this kind of deep dissatisfaction. If he had wanted more excitement, more passion, more anything, all he ever had to do was talk to me. But this wasn't about us. He had made his choice long before tonight. After what felt like an eternity, the sobs subsided, leaving behind a hollow, aching emptiness. I pushed myself up from the floor. The tears stopped. Something cold and hard and clear settled in my chest where my heart used to be. A small, foolish part of me still hoped he'd have a change of heart, that his car would pull back into the driveway and he'd walk through that door, begging for forgiveness. He didn't. Of course, he didn't. I walked downstairs. The house, our home, suddenly felt alien, like a stranger's house. I went into the guest room, with its floral wallpaper and the bed that was rarely used. This was my room now. I wasn't a fool. I knew exactly what was coming. We lived in a no-fault state. He was the primary breadwinner. His threat wasn't an empty one. He would try to get the house, the kids, the money. He would leave me with nothing but the broken pieces of our life. He'd walk away with everything, and I'd be the one left paying the price. I sat down at the small desk in the corner and opened my laptop. The screen glowed in the dark room. I logged into our online banking. Years ago, my dear grandmother had passed away and left me a small but significant inheritance. We'd used most of it for the down payment on this very house, but I'd insisted on keeping a portion in a separate savings account under my name only. Garrett knew it existed, but he had no access. I'd always called it my rainy day fund. Well, it was a hurricane. My hands were shaking, but my purpose was clear. First, I went to our joint savings account. I transferred exactly half of the balance into my personal account. Then, I pulled up the statements for our 3 joint credit cards. I paid off the balances on all of them, every single penny, using the money from our joint checking. Then, one by one, I canceled them. I had to speak to a representative for the last one. I kept my voice steady, my tone businesslike. Yes, the reason for cancellation is divorce. I requested new cards, in my name only. By Monday morning, first thing, I would go to HR at the library where I worked part-time and have my paycheck redirected to my personal account. I drafted an email to our financial advisor, to be sent at 9 a.m. Monday, instructing him to split our investment portfolio down the middle. With the first steps of my new, terrifying life in motion, I went to the kitchen and poured myself a large glass of wine. I tried to sleep in that strange, cold guest bed, but my mind was a racetrack of what-ifs and recriminations. Could I have stopped him? Was I not enough? The questions were a form of self-torture. Sometime before dawn, I finally gave up. I got up, got dressed, and made a pot of the strongest coffee I could. And I waited. Around 9 o'clock, the front door opened. Garrett waltzed in, whistling, as if he'd just returned from a pleasant morning jog. "Morning, sweetheart," he chirped. "I'm back, just like I promised." I didn't look at him. I just sat there at the kitchen table, the ceramic mug warm between my cold hands. Sometime during that long, dark night, my grief had burned away, leaving behind something sharper. Clarity. He'd made his choice. This wasn't my fault. I didn't deserve this. They say you can't stop loving someone overnight, and maybe that's true. But love, I learned, can curdle into something else entirely. An indifference so profound it's like a void. By morning, I didn't love Garrett. I didn't even have the energy to hate him. I just didn't care. And that, I knew with a chilling certainty, was the true death of a marriage. He found me in the kitchen a few minutes later, still in his clothes from the night before. "There you are," he said, spreading his arms wide as he approached me. "See? I'm back. So everything can go back to normal now." I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. I put my hand up, stopping him before he could touch me. "Don't," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "God only knows where your hands and your lips have been." His eyes widened in surprise. I pressed on. "You and Phoebe need to get tested. For everything. I want a notarized report from a clinic before you come anywhere near me or my things again." The surprise on his face curdled into irritation. "I see you're still sulking," he sneered. "Fine. I'm going upstairs to take a nap. I had a long night. Hopefully, you'll get over this little tantrum by the time I wake up, and we can talk like adults. And for the record, you owe me an apology for this attitude." He turned and left. I just sat there, waiting. I knew what was coming. It didn't take long. A minute later, a furious roar came from upstairs. "Beverly! What the hell did you do? Where are my clothes? What is going on?" He stormed back into the kitchen, his face a mask of rage. "What's your problem?" I asked, feigning wide-eyed confusion. "All my things are right where they belong." "My stuff. My clothes, my toiletries, they're gone from the master bedroom," he snapped. "Ah, I see," I said, taking a slow sip of my coffee. "You seem to be under the impression that the master bedroom is still ours. It's not. My things are in my bedroom. Your things are now in the guest room. Where they belong." His face twisted in disbelief. "You moved out?" "No," I said calmly, setting my mug down with a soft click. "You did. I told you I wouldn't tolerate this. I moved out of our marriage. The bedroom is just the first step. Soon, I'll be moving out of this house completely." His jaw tightened. "We'll talk about this later. I'll give you a week to cool off and get over this ridiculous tantrum. Then you can move everything back where it belongs." "Not until I see that notarized test result," I said, turning my attention back to my laptop. He let out a frustrated growl and stormed out. I spent the rest of the day in a flurry of quiet, determined activity. I deep-dived into divorce laws online. I scheduled 3 viewings for small apartments for the coming week. I printed out years of bank statements, tax returns, and investment reports, creating a thick file for the divorce lawyer I knew I'd have to hire. When Audrey and Spencer came home that afternoon, the tension in the house was a thick, suffocating blanket. I tried to act normal, but it was impossible. That evening was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Garrett, in a transparent attempt to win me over, cooked my favorite meal, homemade lasagna. He put on music, acted like the charming, perfect husband and father. He thought a display of normalcy would break me. He handed me a glass of expensive Merlot as I walked into the dining room. "I poured this for you," he said, leaning in as if to kiss me. I turned my face away, and his lips met the air. He hesitated for a second, a flicker of something, annoyance? Embarrassment, in his eyes. I didn't care. I took the glass from his hand, walked directly to the kitchen sink, and poured the rich, red wine down the drain. I then got myself a glass of ice water. I could feel the kids' eyes on me. The silence at the dinner table was deafening. I didn't touch the lasagna. I just moved the salad around on my plate. Finally, Spencer, my sweet boy who is usually so quiet, asked, "Mom, aren't you going to eat? Dad made your favorite." "No, sweetheart. I'm not hungry," I replied, my voice gentle but firm. After the pretense of dinner was over, I retreated to my new room and locked the door. I didn't help with the cleanup. A while later, I grabbed my car keys and just left. I drove aimlessly for an hour, the dark roads a reflection of my own inner landscape. I ended up at a 24-hour diner and had a grilled cheese sandwich and a vanilla milkshake. It was the best thing I'd eaten in days. When I got home, it was nearly midnight. The house was dark, except for a light on in the guest room. I went to the master bedroom, my sanctuary, and not only locked the door but wedged my heaviest armchair under the knob. Just in case. He knocked a few times, his voice wheedling. "Bev? Come on, open up. Let's talk." I stayed silent, my back against the door, until I heard his footsteps retreat. The next morning, a Sunday, I was up at dawn. I needed to keep busy. The kids stumbled into the kitchen one by one, their faces etched with confusion. I put on a brave face for them. I made them pancakes, just like any other Sunday. "Morning, honey, want chocolate chips in yours?" I asked Audrey. "Sure, Mom, thanks." A few minutes later, Spencer came in. "I'll make yours next, sweetie," I said, flipping the ones on the griddle. Then Garrett entered. He grabbed a mug from the cupboard and stared at the empty coffee pot with an entitled glare. "You couldn't save me a cup?" "You're a grown man, Garrett. You know how to make coffee," I said without looking at him. He scoffed. "Never mind." He glanced at the stove. "So, you made pancakes?" "They're for the kids," I said, sliding a fresh plate in front of Spencer. He glared at me, but I refused to meet his gaze. After breakfast, I walked out of the kitchen without another word. By noon, I was on the living room couch, trying to lose myself in a football game. Garrett came in, still trying his passive-aggressive reconciliation tactics. He placed a plate of leftover lasagna and a cold beer on the coffee table in front of me. "I brought you lunch, so you don't miss the game," he said with that infuriatingly fake smile. I looked at the plate. I looked at him. And then, without a word, I drew my foot back and kicked the coffee table. The plate, the beer, the fork, they all went flying. Lasagna splattered against the wall, and glass and beer foamed on the Persian rug. He gasped in shock. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, got myself a bottle of water from the fridge, and sat back down as if nothing had happened. I wasn't eating his peace offering. I wasn't drinking it. And no, I wasn't going to clean it up. He brought it in, he could clean up the mess. "We need to talk," he said, his voice trembling with rage. "Shut up." "The game is on," I muttered, my eyes glued to the screen. "For God's sake, Beverly, the children have noticed," he pressed. "Good," I said, not flinching. "Then they'll also notice when I'm gone." He crossed his arms, his face a thundercloud. "You're not moving out. There is not going to be a divorce." I just ignored him. Later that afternoon, the real confrontation happened. He must have sent them in. Audrey and Spencer sat down on the chairs across from me. The TV was muted. The silence was heavy. Audrey, always the more confrontational one, spoke first. "Mom, what is going on with you and Dad?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Your father and I are getting a divorce. I need you both to know this isn't about you. We both love you more than anything, but this is between us." Spencer frowned, his brow furrowed with a worry that broke my heart. "Why?" "Because your father did something that I can never forgive," I said, my voice firm. He knew exactly how I felt about it, and he chose to do it anyway. And he isn't sorry. Audrey's expression hardened. "You mean his date? With Aunt Phoebe?" A jolt went through me. I turned to her, stunned. "You knew about it?" "Yeah," she admitted, refusing to meet my eyes. "Dad told us. He said you weren't going to be happy about it." My stomach twisted into a painful knot. "So you know he cheated on me?" With my own stepsister. Spencer shook his head vehemently. No, he didn't, he insisted, his voice full of a conviction that could only have come from his father. He told you first. It might have been sneaky, but he was honest. That's not cheating. Yes, Mom, Audrey added, her voice taking on a patronizing tone. He said if you really loved him, you'd be able to move on. He said it was just one night. I stared at them, speechless. The betrayal was absolute. It wasn't just my husband anymore. It was my children. They were siding with him. With her. Really? I asked, my voice turning to ice. Let me ask you something, Audrey. If he loved me, why would he want to sleep with someone else in the first place? Audrey sighed, a dramatic, world-weary sigh that only a 16-year-old could manage. Come on, Mom. It was just once. He promised it won't happen again. Let's talk about promises, I said, leaning forward, my voice low and intense. 20 years ago, in a church filled with our friends and family, he promised to be mine, and only mine. For better or for worse. No exceptions. If he can break that vow, that sacred promise, so easily, why should I ever trust another promise he makes? Spencer met my gaze, his young face set in a stubborn frown. But you promised too, Mom. You promised to stay with him through good times and bad times. That's true, I did, I acknowledged. But a contract has two sides. When he broke his most important vow, he broke the entire contract. That releases me from mine. Audrey threw her hands up in frustration. We just don't get it. We don't get why you're willing to end our whole family over one single night. I shook my head, the full weight of their judgment crashing down on me. In this story they'd been told, I was the villain. I was the one ruining the family. He had made his choice, and when I made mine in response, I was the one to blame. They didn't want to hear my side. Garrett and Phoebe had already scripted their roles. He was the honest, modern husband, and I was the rigid, unforgiving shrew. What was one night out of 7,305? To them, it was a rounding error. To me, it was everything. When they realized I wasn't going to back down, they stood up and left the room. I unmuted the TV and watched the rest of the game in a profound, soul-crushing peace. The final straw came the next day. I came home from a grocery run to find 2 extra cars in the driveway. My parents' car and Garrett's parents' car. An intervention. They were all sitting in my living room, arranged like a tribunal. Garrett sat between his mother and my mother, looking like the aggrieved party. Garrett's father, a man I had always respected, spoke first. Beverly, he said, his voice laced with disappointment. May and I are very disappointed in what Garrett did. But we think you're overreacting. I just crossed my arms, waiting. Yes, he slept with another woman, he continued, as if discussing a minor traffic violation. And yes, it was disrespectful. But it was one mistake in 20 years of marriage. You have 2 wonderful children. Don't throw all of this away. I kept my voice perfectly even. It wasn't a mistake. A mistake is accidental. This was planned. It was deliberate. And it was with my stepsister. My own mother spoke then, her voice soft and placating, and her words broke the last remaining piece of my heart. He didn't cheat on you, Beverly. Not technically. He told you about it first. I blinked, staring at her. Excuse me? He was honest, she insisted. That shows he still respects you. And Phoebe is family. Surely you all could have sat down and worked something out. It takes a village, dear. I let out a sound that was half scoff, half sob. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Even my own mother was making excuses for him, for them. My dad tried to be the voice of reason. We understand you're hurt, honey. But you have to think about the bigger picture. Garrett loves you. He promised it won't happen again. You can get past this with counseling. Don't let your pride cost you your children and your home. I stood there, completely and utterly alone. Surrounded by the people who were supposed to love me most, and I had never felt more isolated. They expected me to forgive this. To forget. To welcome him back into my bed. I couldn't do it. Without another word, I turned, walked to my room, and slammed the door in their shocked faces. The divorce was a nightmare, just as he'd promised. Garrett fought me on every single item, dragging out the proceedings for over a year. The judge, seeing a high-earning husband and a part-time working wife, ordered counseling. I went to all 12 sessions. I sat on the plush couch, stared at the wall, and didn't say a single word until the therapist finally gave up and reported to the court that I was uncooperative. The final decree felt like a death sentence. He got to stay in the house, my house, with Phoebe. I was ordered to continue paying half the mortgage until it was sold. Since the kids, now older, chose to live with him, I was ordered to pay child support. And then the final insult, spousal maintenance. $1,000 a month, for 5 long years. $1,000 of my hard-earned money, going to him and the woman he cheated on me with. They got married the weekend after the divorce was finalized, a small ceremony in the backyard, in my garden. Half my meager paycheck went to them. I was forced to cash out a portion of my retirement savings, taking a huge tax hit, just to afford a down payment on a small, run-down fixer-upper in a less desirable part of town. It wasn't much, but it was mine. My nights and weekends became a blur of spackle, paint, and cheap laminate flooring. I poured all my grief and rage into that little house, sanding floors until my hands were raw, painting walls until my arms ached. It was the only way I could stay sane. Visitation with the kids was a cruel joke. Garrett always had an excuse. Oh, Audrey has a dance recital this weekend. Spencer has a big history project due. When I did manage to see them, they were cold and distant. They treated me like a stranger, a family obligation they had to endure. One day, when Spencer was 17, he told me flat out they didn't want to see me anymore. It's just too awkward, Mom. I could have fought it in court, filed for contempt. My lawyer, a kind but pragmatic woman, advised against it. What's the point, Beverly? She'd said gently. You can't force a relationship. So I stopped trying. I still sent gifts for birthdays and Christmas. I spent hours picking out the perfect things. They always came back a week later, marked return to sender. The only thing that never came back? The checks I wrote every month into their college funds. They cashed those without a word. 5 long, lonely years later, I wrote the final spousal maintenance check. I put it in the envelope, and as I sealed it, I felt a lightness I hadn't felt in years. I was finally, financially, free. But there was one last piece of unfinished business. My name was still on the deed to that house. Our divorce agreement was crystal clear. He and Phoebe could live there until our youngest child, Spencer, graduated from high school. After that, the house was to be sold, and the equity split 50-50ths. Spencer had tossed his graduation cap in the air last June. I called my lawyer the next morning. The housing market had boomed. The house, which had been worth around $300,000 when we divorced, was now appraised at nearly $500,000. The mortgage was almost paid off. The equity was substantial. I wasn't just doing it for the money, though God knows I needed it. I was doing it because it was my right. And, I admit, a small, bitter part of me knew it would infuriate Garrett. A week later, my phone rang. An unsaved number, but I knew who it was. Beverly, what the hell is this? Garrett's voice snapped, no greeting, no preamble. A slow, satisfied smile spread across my face. I leaned back in my chair. Oh, hey, Garrett. Long time no talk. To what do I owe the pleasure? Don't play dumb. Why did a realtor show up at my house this morning with a sales contract and a for sale sign? Because, as per our legally binding divorce decree, the triggering condition for the sale of the asset has been met, I said, quoting the legal jargon my lawyer had taught me. Spencer has graduated. It's time to sell. You need to sign the papers. I'm not selling my house, he roared. It's not your house, Garrett. It's our house, I countered smoothly. And you have two options. You can either sign the listing agreement, or you can buy me out. Your choice. You have 30 days. He screamed a few more choice words at me before hanging up. I felt a grim satisfaction. It took a couple of months and a threatening letter from my lawyer, but he finally caved. He and Phoebe had to scramble to get a home equity loan to buy me out. I walked away with a check for $275,000. It was the first time I had felt a flicker of victory in a very long time. That money changed my life. I paid off the mortgage on my little fixer-upper. I renovated the kitchen. And in the backyard, I built my dream, a beautiful, light-filled pottery studio. I bought a brand new kiln. I spent the next few years healing, rebuilding my life not out of anger, but out of a newfound love for myself. I started selling my pottery at local art fairs. It wasn't about the money, it was about creating something beautiful out of a lump of clay, something that had been through the fire and came out stronger. It was at one of those fairs that I met Russell. He was a quiet, kind-eyed man who made beautiful, handcrafted wooden furniture. His booth was right next to mine. He'd lost his wife to cancer a few years prior and was raising his young son, Leo, on his own. We started talking on the first day, about art, about wood grain and firing temperatures. By the second day, we were talking about life. I told him my story. The whole ugly, painful mess. He didn't flinch. He just listened. When I was done, he reached across the space between our booths and gently took my hand. His was warm and calloused from his work. I'm so sorry, Beverly, he said, his voice full of a sincere empathy that I hadn't felt from anyone in years. You didn't deserve any of that. His simple kindness felt like a dam breaking inside me. At the end of the fair, he asked if he could take me to dinner. I said yes. As he walked away with his son, Leo, a bright, freckle-faced kid of about 10, turned back. He gave me a huge, conspiratorial grin, a quick wink, and 2 enthusiastic thumbs up. Life with Russell was easy. In the best possible way. It was a gentle, quiet love, built on shared understanding and mutual respect. Leo was a joy, a whirlwind of energy and laughter that filled my quiet house. A year after we met, Russell and I got married in a simple ceremony in my garden, surrounded by the roses that had survived the storm. For the first time in a decade, my life was peaceful. It was good. And then, one Tuesday afternoon, 10 years after my life had been torn apart, my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Hello? A bright, excited voice chirped on the other end. Hi, Mom? My heart stopped. It was Audrey. Yes? I said, my voice cautious. It's me. I have great news, she said, bubbling with an excitement that felt a world away from our last conversation. I'm getting married. A complicated mix of emotions washed over me, joy, pain, a deep, lingering hurt. But I pushed the hurt down. That's wonderful, sweetheart, I said, forcing a warmth I didn't entirely feel into my voice. I want you to be at the wedding, she said. A flicker of hope ignited in my chest. Of course, I said, the words catching in my throat. To walk you down the aisle would be the greatest honor of my life. The line went silent for a moment. Then, she cleared her throat. Oh, well, no. Dad is walking me down the aisle. He and Aunt Phoebe are paying for the whole thing, you see. And since it would be, awkward for everyone, we thought it would be best if you weren't in the front row. But I really, really want you to be there. As a guest. The flicker of hope died, leaving behind a familiar cold ash. Dad, I repeated, my voice flat. The man who cheated on me with your aunt, his wife, is walking you down the aisle. Audrey sighed, a sound of pure exasperation. Mom, can you please not do this today? I'm trying to fix things. And besides, if you hadn't left and been so dramatic, Dad and Aunt Phoebe would never have fallen in love in the first place. The sheer, unmitigated gall of that statement broke something in me. So, after all these years, you still think I did something wrong? More silence. She didn't have an answer. I took a deep, shuddering breath. Then I won't be there, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. You just handed the last, most precious honor I have as your mother to the man who shattered our family. And frankly, Audrey, I doubt your marriage will last. You were raised by liars. You'll probably end up cheating, just like your father did. Her voice turned to ice. Fine. If that's how you feel, then don't expect to ever see your grandchildren. If you raise them with the same twisted values you were raised with, I shot back, the words tasting like poison, then I don't want to. There was a sharp, wounded inhale on the other end of the line. Then, through gritted teeth, she spat out words that echoed her father's from a decade ago. Dad was right about you. You are a bitter, selfish woman. And then she hung up. I stood there in my beautiful, sunlit kitchen, the phone still pressed to my ear, the dial tone buzzing. I slowly lowered my hand. I felt nothing. Just a vast, cold emptiness. I mechanically put on my apron, walked into my studio, and got back to work at my pottery wheel. The clay wasn't going to center itself. I was so engrossed in the rhythmic spinning, in forcing the chaotic lump of clay into something beautiful, that I didn't notice Leo, now a lanky teenager, had come home from school. I didn't see him glance at my face, see the unshed tears in my eyes, and then quietly pick up my phone from the counter. I was absolutely furious. I had tried. I had reached out, extended an olive branch to the woman who abandoned us, and she had thrown it back in my face and insulted my future husband. This was her fault. All of it. She had torn our family apart with her stubbornness. My phone, sitting on my desk, rang again. Another unknown number. In the midst of wedding planning, I was fielding calls from florists, caterers, and DJs all day. I answered without thinking. Hello, this is Audrey. A sharp, unfamiliar voice, a young man's voice, came through the line. Is this Audrey Williams? Yes, I said, a little impatiently. Who is this? You can stop calling my mom and being a cast iron witch to her, the voice snapped, dripping with a venom that took me aback. I blinked, completely caught off guard. Excuse me? Who the hell are you? My name is Leo, he said, his tone as cold and sharp as broken glass. My dad married your ex-mom, and she is the best thing that has ever happened to us. I love her, and I will not stand by and let you treat her the way you do. You, Audrey, are an insult to daughters everywhere. I was reeling, trying to process the words. What are you talking about? You don't know anything about my family. Leo let out a bitter, humorless laugh. Oh, I know everything. I know your father cheated on my mom with her own stepsister. I know he manipulated you and your brother into blaming her. And I know that you defended him. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. My own mom, my real mom who passed away, she would have been ashamed of you. He paused, and his next words were delivered like precision strikes. Beverly isn't my biological mother, but she is more of a mother to me in the few years I've known her than you have been a daughter to her in your entire life. In fact, I should probably thank your slimy, cheating father for being so stupid. Because if he hadn't thrown away a woman like Beverly, I would never have gotten her as my mom. I was utterly speechless. My throat was tight, my mind blank. Leo's voice dropped even lower, colder. So let me give you some free advice. When you say your wedding vows tomorrow, I want you to look deep into your fiancé's eyes and imagine what it will feel like when he cheats on you. Because based on the example you follow, he will. And when that day comes, and your perfect little world falls apart, I want you to call me. I would love to laugh in your face. And then the line went dead. I stared at my phone, my hand trembling. I had no idea my mother had remarried. That she had a new son. And yet, something about the fierce loyalty in that boy's voice, the raw truth in his words, it burrowed under my skin. It reminded me of a time, long ago, when I would have defended my mother just as fiercely. Before my father and Phoebe had so expertly twisted my reality, convincing me that my mother's pain was actually her being selfish, that her refusal to accept their affair was her destroying our family. I had believed them. For 10 years, I had believed them. The wedding day arrived in a haze. As my bridesmaids fussed over my hair and makeup, my mother's final words and that boy's venomous prophecy echoed in my mind. For a fleeting moment, I felt a deep, aching sadness that my mother wasn't there. But I pushed it down. I had reached out. She had rejected me. This was her choice. My fiancé, Mitchell, was waiting for me at the altar, his handsome face lit up with a nervous, happy smile. My heart swelled. I was surrounded by the family that had chosen to stay. Spencer stood proudly as one of Mitchell's groomsmen. My father, Garrett, beamed as he took my arm to walk me down the aisle. At the altar, he lifted my veil, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "Congratulations, baby girl." The priest's voice was a distant drone. "Who gives this bride away?" My father answered, his voice full of paternal pride. "Her Aunt Phoebe and I do." Something about that sentence felt deeply wrong, a discordant note in a beautiful symphony. I pushed the feeling aside. I looked into Mitchell's loving eyes and began to recite the vows I had memorized. To have and to hold, from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, forsaking all others, till death do us part. I froze on the words forsaking all others. As I looked into Mitchell's eyes, the church, the guests, everything faded away. My vision blurred, and a horrifying image flashed in my mind, Mitchell, years from now, with another woman. Then, just as quickly, the image shifted. I saw myself, a decade older, standing before my father, telling him I had slept with someone else, using his own pathetic excuses. A collective murmur rippled through the pews. Mitchell's brow furrowed in concern. "Audrey? Honey, are you okay?" And in that moment, a weight I hadn't even known I was carrying for 10 long years simply lifted. A real, genuine smile spread across my face. "I finally get it," I whispered. Mitchell blinked, completely confused. "Ah, that's great, but what do you get?" "Everything." I took a deep, steadying breath and looked him right in the eyes, my love for him clearer than ever before. "Mitchell, do you love me?" His frown deepened into worry. "Of course I do." "Audrey, what's going on?" "You're scaring me." I exhaled slowly, a long, cleansing breath. "Because I can't marry you today." A collective, horrified gasp swept through the church. Mitchell's face went white. You're leaving me at the altar?" I squeezed his hands tightly, reassuringly. "No. Never. We are getting married. I promise you. Just not today." The whispers in the church grew louder. I ignored them. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't care what anyone else thought. "This," I said, gesturing vaguely at the whole elaborate affair, "this is all wrong. And I need to make it right. I am only getting married once in my life, Mitchell, and it will be to you. But I need to fix something first." I turned to face our stunned guests, my voice ringing out with a newfound confidence. "I am so sorry, everyone, but I can't do this today. We are not canceling this wedding, we are just postponing it. We will let you know the new date. But hey, I added, a grin breaking through, the reception hall is paid for, the bar is open, and the band is already set up. So please, go, eat, drink, and enjoy the party. A few scattered, confused chuckles emerged from the crowd. My gaze found my father's. I smirked. And don't worry, Dad. You're still paying the bill. Without another word, I grabbed Mitchell's hand and turned to walk back down the aisle. But before we could leave, my father and Phoebe stepped in front of us, blocking our path. My father's face was a thundercloud of fury. What in God's name do you think you're doing? He demanded. I met his glare without flinching. I'm fixing a mistake. Phoebe, her face pale, asked, what mistake? My jaw tightened. The biggest mistake I ever made in my life, I said, my voice dripping with contempt. The mistake of believing your lies. The mistake of blaming my mother instead of helping her pack your cheating, pathetic bags and kicking you to the curb. My father's lips parted in shock. Audrey, I am your father. I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Yes, you are. You're also a liar and a cheat. And you know what they say, Dad. Once a cheater, always a cheater. A horrifying clarity washed over me. The reason I had been so blind for so long was because to admit he was wrong meant admitting my entire world since the divorce had been built on a lie. If Mitchell ever betrayed me the way you betrayed Mom, it would destroy me, I said, my voice shaking with emotion. And if I ever did that to him, I would be no better than you. All this time, I've been blind. My mother was the one who was telling the truth. She was the example of strength. You were the mistake. What are you talking about? He blustered, but I saw it. The flicker of pure panic in his eyes. I tilted my head, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper. Come on, Dad. Do you really think I don't know about your business trips with your assistant, Jessica? Or how about Carlos, the pool guy at your new house? It's funny how he always has to spend extra time cleaning the filter when Phoebe's out shopping. I came home from college early a few times. I saw the texts. I saw everything. I just chose to ignore it because it was easier. A horrified gasp rippled through the church. Phoebe stared at my father, her face crumbling. Then, an idea, sharp and brilliant, struck me. I turned to my father, and with the sweetest, iciest smile I could muster, I said, before God and all our friends and family, I vow to pay you back every single dime you spent on this wedding. And I make that vow with the same sincerity my mother had when she made her vows to you. His face went ashen. Yeah, he shouldn't hold his breath. With my father stunned into a horrified silence and Phoebe looking like she was about to faint, I grabbed Mitchell's hand. Let's go, I whispered. On our way out, I saw the videographer, his camera still rolling, his eyes wide. I gave him a quick nod. Did you get all that? He grinned, a look of pure professional glee on his face. Oh yeah. Every glorious second. He was already popping the memory card out to make me a copy. I quickly signed a release form he had on a clipboard, giving him permission to post the entire unedited clip online. Let the world see my father for who he really was. If you're still listening, could you do me a huge favor and hit that like button and comment the number 1 down below? That way, I'll know you've given me a like, and I'll know you're right here with me on this journey. Your support is a massive encouragement for me. Please, comment the number 1, and let me tell you what happened next. Mitchell and I rushed out of the church into the bright sunshine, leaving the chaos behind. His brother was supposed to drive his car home after the reception, but it was already packed for our honeymoon. Our plans had changed, but for the first time, I felt like I was heading in the right direction. I slid into the passenger seat, my ridiculous white dress bunching around me, and my heart hammered with a wild mix of terror and elation as Mitchell turned the ignition. Where to? He asked, his voice steady, his eyes full of a love and trust that made me want to weep. Just drive west, I said, pulling up my phone, my fingers flying across the screen. I'll put in the address. Finding my mother wasn't hard. I knew the name of the small town she had moved to. A quick online search of public records gave me her address. 2 hours away. 2 hours to rehearse the apology I'd owed her for a decade. I just prayed she was home. We didn't stop to change. I had to do this now. Opening your front door to find a young woman in a full wedding gown and a man in a tuxedo on your porch is, I imagine, a surreal experience. Even more so when that woman is the daughter who cut you out of her life 10 years ago. I knew today was her wedding day. So why on earth was she here, looking like a runaway bride? Her voice, when she spoke, was a trembling whisper. Mom? Can we talk? I was stunned into silence. I could only step aside, gesturing dumbly toward the living room, where Russell and Leo sat on the couch, their mouths agape. Audrey, I said, my voice hoarse. This is my husband, Russell. And our son, Leo. I turned to the handsome young man beside her, who was looking at me with an expression of profound respect. And you are? Oh, right, Audrey interjected, her cheeks flushing. Mom, this is my fiancé, Mitchell Jensen. Fiancé? I frowned, the confusion mounting. I thought you just got married. She hesitated, her eyes filling with tears. I couldn't go through with it, she choked out. Not without you there. Not without you being the one to walk me down the aisle. The tears finally spilled over, trailing down her cheeks. Mom, I finally understand. You were right all along. I was so blind, so caught up in Dad's lies. I blamed you when he was the one who walked away. I was young and stupid and so wrong. I need you in my life. I need you to forgive me. And I need you to walk me down the aisle. I stood there, frozen, the world tilting on its axis for the second time in my life, but this time, it was tilting back into place. Still, one question burned in my mind. Audrey, what happened at the wedding? She glanced at Mitchell, who gave her an encouraging nod. She pulled a small thumb drive from the tiny purse she was carrying. You should probably just watch this. While Mitchell went to the car to grab their suitcase and Russell, ever the gracious host, showed Audrey to a guest room so she could change out of her dress, I plugged the drive into our smart TV. When they all returned to the living room, I pressed play. I watched the video of the beautiful wedding ceremony. I watched my daughter begin her vows. And then I watched her stop. I watched as, in front of a packed church, she found her voice and courageously called out her father, exposing him for the serial cheater and liar he was. By the time the video ended, the room was silent. Audrey turned to me, her eyes raw with emotion. When I looked at Mitchell, she said softly, I realized how much it would hurt me if he ever did to me what Dad did to you. I finally, truly, understood what forsaking all others really means. And I realized how much I had dishonored you, the most honorable woman I know, by letting that man take your place. She then turned to Leo, who was watching from the doorway with a shy smile. And I need my little brother to be a groomsman. Your very blunt tough love was the wake-up call I desperately needed. We talked for hours that afternoon, and for days after. Audrey and Mitchell ended up staying with us for the entire week, their impromptu, pre-honeymoon. It was the most healing week of my life. I got to know Mitchell, and to my relief, he was a solid, wonderful man. And I got my daughter back. Spencer, hearing what had happened, drove out to see us by the end of the week. The reunion was awkward at first, full of unspoken apologies, but for the first time in a decade, I had both of my children under my roof. Laughing. Talking. Healing. Audrey ignored the hundreds of furious calls and texts from her father and Phoebe. She did, however, answer the calls from her friends, who breathlessly recounted how the wedding guests had, indeed, enjoyed the reception on her father's dime. He had apparently tried to cancel everything, but it was too late. He ended up sulking in a corner with a drink while everyone else partied. Spencer even sent Audrey a video he'd discreetly taken of Garrett and Phoebe having a spectacular, screaming match in the parking lot. Their marriage, it seemed, was crumbling under the weight of the truth. By the end of the week, a new wedding date was set. Same venue, exactly 1 year later. This time, I was paying for it. And this time, I was walking her down the aisle. The following year was a whirlwind of happy, chaotic planning. The video of the first wedding, as Audrey had hoped, went locally viral. My ex-husband Garrett's perfect public image was shattered. His business suffered. His marriage to Phoebe imploded in a messy, public divorce that cost him a fortune. He ended up having to sell the house, my garden, to pay for it all. Phoebe, I heard, moved to another state to escape the humiliation. Karma, it turns out, is a patient and thorough accountant. The day of the second wedding was everything the first one wasn't. It was filled with genuine joy and love. Ready, Mom? Audrey asked, squeezing my arm as we waited for the church doors to open. No mother is ever truly ready to let her daughter go, but I was more than ready for this. I was honored. The doors swung open, and the music swelled. With my head held high, I led my beautiful daughter down the aisle. I saw Spencer in the front row, sitting next to Russell and a beaming Leo. I saw Garrett in the fourth row, a grim-faced spectator at the wedding he wasn't hosting. The front row seat he had once claimed now belonged to my family. My real family. The priest's voice filled the sanctuary. Who gives this woman in marriage to be wed? I straightened my shoulders, my voice clear and strong. Her mother does. I kissed Audrey's cheek, whispered, I love you, baby girl, and placed her hand in Mitchell's. Then I took my rightful seat beside my husband. I watched as Audrey faced Mitchell, her voice steady and sure, her eyes never leaving his. When she reached the final part of her vows, she lifted her chin, her voice ringing out with an unwavering certainty that filled my heart to bursting, leaving everyone else behind. It was a perfect ceremony. At the reception, I sat at the head table, with Russell's hand warmly in mine. Across the hall, I could see Garrett nursing a whiskey, his gaze flickering between me and the dance floor, his face a mask of bitter regret. My duties were done. I had walked my daughter down the aisle. I had given a heartfelt toast to the happy couple. I had shared a beautiful mother-daughter dance. Then, as a slow song began to play, a familiar voice cut through the happy chatter. Beverly. Mind if I borrow you for a dance? It was Garrett. Russell gave my hand a questioning squeeze. I smiled at my husband. It's okay. I'll be right back. I let Garrett lead me onto the dance floor, keeping a respectable distance between us. For a moment, we danced in a tense, awkward silence. Then, he spoke, his voice thick with self-pity. You were just supposed to give me that one night, you know. That was the deal. We were supposed to move on from it. I sighed, tired of this old, broken record. That's not how marriage works, Garrett. That's not how love works. I never wanted any of this to happen, he whispered, as if he were the victim. I just needed one night. We could have been together forever. You're the only woman I ever really loved. I arched an eyebrow. Then why did you marry Phoebe? Because you divorced me, he said, his voice rising. I didn't love her. Not like I loved you. But I liked her, and I didn't want to be alone. He shook his head, a pathetic, broken man. So you destroyed our marriage for one night of mediocre sex with my stepsister, then you wrecked your second marriage because you couldn't keep it in your pants. He had the grace to look down at his feet. I never thought Audrey would turn on me like that. That's the problem, Garrett, I said, as the final notes of the song faded and I pulled away from him for the last time. You never think about anyone but yourself. He reached for my hand, a desperate look in his eyes. We had a good marriage, Bev. For a long time. Maybe we could. I laughed. A real, genuine, liberating laugh. Not just no, Garrett, but hell no. Even if I wasn't happily married to a wonderful man, you destroyed any chance of that when you poisoned our children against me. Now, look around. I have a husband I love and who respects me. I have a son I adore. And I have 2 beautiful children who finally found their way back to me. The absolute best I can offer you is polite civility at future family events. That is it. Goodbye, Garrett. That night was the last time we ever had a real conversation. My life now is full. It's loud, it's messy, and it's overflowing with a joy I thought I had lost forever. Audrey and Mitchell have 2 beautiful children, my grandchildren, who fill my house with laughter. Spencer married a wonderful woman, and they're expecting their first child. Our homes are close, and our holidays are a chaotic, happy circus of food, family, and love. Some people might say I should have fought for more revenge against Garrett and Phoebe. But the truth is, I didn't have to. They destroyed themselves with their own lies and deceit. Any action I took would have only dragged me down to their level. Instead, I chose to rise. I chose to build a new life. Because the best revenge, as they say, isn't loud and flashy. It's a life well lived. And my life is very, very well lived. Thank you all for listening to my story. It wasn't an easy one to tell, but sharing it, knowing you're out there listening, it helps. If you've been through something similar, if you've ever felt broken and alone, please know that you are not. There is always hope for a new chapter. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, and please, share it with someone who might need to hear that it's possible to rebuild, to heal, and to find happiness again. I'll see you all in the next one. Take care of yourselves.